No, that's fine. I've moved them around, so you're good. I've been doing all sorts.
When I look at these boards,
that's right. Tactically, I've been out of the game too long because they're playing a 9 at the back.
I don't think Oppenheimer would work this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You've got 15 tactics boards. Now I know a manager has to have a tactics board in his office, but 15. Actually, to be fair, my first question was going to be something else, but I'm not actually asking about tactics boards. I've never seen as many tactics boards in my life. Yeah. Eddie, tactics boards.
Are we starting?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
we just relaxed and so. What are the difference between all of them?
Yeah, but it's weird because I don't actually use tactics boards that much on sort of game day. So I'm not obsessed with tactics boards, I want you to know that. But for planning purposes, for training, like with how we train, I feel like we need to know everything that's going on, so we just try and break it up, and yeah, we have a tactics board for pretty much everything here.
My actual first question was going to be to you, or first statement was, you're the most difficult person I've ever interviewed. In a good way, I suppose, in some ways. It was at Bournemouth. Do you know Brett Smart, the floor manager from Sky? He said to me, just be ready for Eddie because his answers are very short and we need 3 minutes out of you. And if you've only got 4 or 5... Anyway, I asked you 5 questions and we were about 1:20 in. And I was literally treading water thinking, what's my next? It was one of the first manager interviews I'd done. Is that something that you think when you go into an interview, I was going to go very short answers and not give a lot away?
Well, I'm actually, that's the first time that feedback's come my way, yeah. Yeah, so I might have to pad my answers out a bit for you today because that's just natural, I don't want to over-talk. I'm well aware of that when I'm asked a question. I don't want to repeat myself or people get turned off, so probably I keep it short for that, really.
So back to the tactics boards, you've got all these tactics boards. Is that because you design every single individual practice on each individual board before you do you take all the training sessions or do you split up the teams into units? How's your coaching day go?
Yeah, I definitely on the planning phase, I'm all the way through it with the other coaches. I wouldn't necessarily take every drill. I'm not necessarily saying I have to have my fingerprints all over it, but I'll be there and I'll be reactive with it, even if I'm not taking it, because I want the responsibility of on match day knowing that it's my work that's impacting the game.
And do you work with both defence and attacking units in terms of, or do you specialise in sort of one of the units more?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Jason Tyndall, my assistant, will predominantly take the majority of the defensive work that we do, and that's been our way of working now for some time.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of the time we'll do that in tandem with each other, or that will be him on its own, and then I'll focus on everything else. I do believe in trying to detail your coaching, so you're not just covering everything blandly. You're going into detail on specific practices and exercises, and I think that will probably continue through our work in the future, where we'll go probably more in depth and more detailed.
I think back to my time at Valencia, which I made many mistakes, but when I got there, I focused almost solely, because they were conceding goals, on the defensive work. I remember speaking to a couple of experienced coaches when I came back, and they said, actually, you'd been better, I think, working on your attacking principles, but I actually found it difficult to coach the attacking play. Would you agree that it's more difficult to coach attacking play than it actually is defensive play?
Yeah, probably yes, I'd say, because the attacking play, you've got so much you can do. You've got so much variety, and it's like an open box for you, really. You can choose which direction you go. I think defensively, you'll have a few choices to make. Are you man-to-man? Are you zonal? But you're limited. And then once you break the work down, it's pretty, I won't say it's everyone will do the same thing, but it's pretty much there of what you need to deliver. But I much prefer it's weird, I was a defender. Yeah. Many people might know that. They'll know what you did in your playing career, they won't know what I did, but I was a defender. But I much prefer to take the attacking side of the game. I don't know why that is, but I almost contrast to my playing style. I'm always thinking creatively for the attackers. So I'm not necessarily one of those managers that follows, my playing career, really.
How have you changed in respect of your style, or how you see your style of play over the sort of period of time you've been a manager?
Well, definitely changed from the early days. I mean, the early days we were very early days, League Two, trying to stay in the league, we were quite pragmatic. Although my sort of inner feelings was that this isn't how I want to play long term. I knew straight away that needs must at that moment. So we were probably quite lucky that we started at that level in League Two, because we were able to change and evolve our playing style through the leagues. And we were able to get results while doing that. And we've come sort of to today, and our style of play today is exactly what I wanted it to be in those very early days. So, and we're always now searching for new and exciting ways to play. We're sort of an open book in that we'll never think that's it, this is how we're going to be forever. We're very much changing all the time.
How do you adapt those little sort of, how do you make those continual changes while still trying to sort of, if you like, focus on your key sort of foundation, fundamental messages that you're giving to, you know what I mean? How do you add something to it to keep it interesting for the players, that next step, if you like?
Well, I think you have to. I think if you're still, so the minute I walk through the door at Newcastle, if I'm still doing the same things 2.5 years later, I think there'll be a problem, because you'll start to lose the players and they'll be bored. Hopefully they're not bored yet. Hopefully they're taking on new information. I think it's a case of how you see the game, really. So I'm always looking at other teams, and I'm always looking at elite games to try and look at things that those teams do and think, could we add that? Would that fit our players and our style? If it doesn't, you don't do it. But if it does, then you might subtly, gradually introduce that to our play.
What team would you look at? I mean, obviously we've seen the Champions League quarterfinals in the last couple of weeks. What game would you look at and think, I like that, I'd like to introduce that? Is there something that you could sort of pick at? And
well, I think it very much depends on the team style. So what I wouldn't want to do is mix our style with something that I really respect. So I really respect a lot of the top teams, obviously Arsenal, Manchester City. Do they play in the style that we do? No, we're different. So we can't be something we're not. We have to be us. And it has to be true to sort of the vision that I have for the game, and it has to be something that I think will enhance our performance. So that might be something, it might be something that Manchester City do, or Arsenal do, or Liverpool do. But it wouldn't be sort of a replica, it would be aligned to our way of playing.
When I watch your teams, I think that at the best, the predominantly attacking teams, you try and win the ball high up the pitch. You don't overcomplicate it at the back, in the sense that you don't sort of play 15, 20 passes. You still look to me like you're trying to, like I suppose we were at United, you're trying to get the ball efficiently forward as quickly as possible into forward play. Is that how you would see your sort of style? That's how I see it when I watch it.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully that is sort of in line with my philosophies. Hopefully we are delivering what we want to. So yeah, we want to be proactive. We want to be an aggressive, high-pressing team. That is one of the fundamentals we had right at the start of our coaching journey. And then, yeah, we're not a complicated team in deep areas in the build-up phase. That may change as we progress, but at the moment we are very proactive, trying to get the ball forward in a controlled way, not in a random way. But I want to see and coach attacking football, with the team always looking to score. We don't try and be overly patient in that build-up phase.
Yeah. Do you sit there like I do quite a lot sometimes, and see a team's centre-backs drop to the 6-yard box and think the risk, the reward doesn't seem to stack up? I mean, it doesn't stack up in my head, even the sort of, just thinking of me playing the game, and you're obviously a defender. Is that how you see it? I think, what's the benefit of this? Do you get a little bit like that as a coach? I mean, obviously you're at the sort of elite coaching level. Do you think like that as a coach?
No, I see the benefit of it, and we will do that. So I've got no issue with necessarily that principle, being really expansive and building with your goalkeeper and that style. It's just when we're doing it not with a view to having 10 passes in our own penalty box, with a view to progressing the play quite quickly up the pitch. So that then comes to the risk over reward. So my personal view is, if we can go forward in 1 or 2 passes, let's do that rather than have 5 or 6.
Do you take it home with you?
Without a doubt, I sit on the sofa the Champions League's on. I say to my eldest son, get me a pen and paper. I've got an idea. You're always there, just thinking of your team, thinking of the next game.
You've done brilliantly well at Newcastle in this last couple of years, and obviously before at Bournemouth. But what was the point at Newcastle where you recognised, actually, I like what I'm seeing here? Sort of, what was there a point in last season where you thought, this is us, this is what we are?
It was probably more the season before, if I'm honest. So it was in our battles to stay in the league.
You saw it that early, did you?
Yeah, started to see towards the end of that season where we were winning games. We had to win a lot of games to stay up because we had such a difficult start. Then I was, there's a really good feeling about the group.
Yeah.
Confidence, there's real ability within the players. I think we could really do something with this group. Now, I didn't expect that to happen so quickly the next season. But I think there was a feeling that we could carry that momentum forward, and I really like some of the players we have, and we managed to bring in some really good ones as well. So it was more the feeling. I instantly, when I came to Newcastle, felt at home and happy, which you never quite know when you go to a new club, if that you're fit with them and vice versa. But I felt that instant connection, and I think that in part goes to how I feel translate, of course, through the team.
Just looking at sort of last season, and obviously it was an exceptional season, and I was thinking, what is success at Newcastle? But when you think of the constraints and the restrictions relating to FFP, this is actually success, isn't it? Between sort of what would be 4th and 6th, I would say is absolute success. Would you agree with that? I mean, that's not lacking ambition, because everyone wants to win the league. When you look at what they're spending at the sort of, if you like, number 1, 2 and 3, it's just a completely different level. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would. I think for us, 4th was never in our eyes last year. It was a case of, could we build from the previous season? Could we continue? Well, firstly, not to have a relegation battle on our hands and grow the team forward. We hit 4th, and I think when we hit 4th, then it's almost a case of, we've climbed so quickly, so early. Where do we go from here? For us, we're hugely ambitious. You never take a step back. It's like, can we improve? Not so much on the league position, but in terms of our general performance. I think at times we have, and then at times we haven't. This year, it's been quite up and down. December in particular was a difficult month for us, but we managed to sort of weather that period. And since New Year, I think we've done okay. I think we have been consistent in our own way. And if we could maintain our position, then I think that would be a great season.
And I know you're not, I mean, none of us are accountants here, but it's one of the sort of expectation issues that you've got the richest owners potentially in the league, yet you can't flex your muscles because of the FFP rules. Where do you sit on it? I'm actually against FFP. I've been for 10, 15 years. The idea that an owner can't spend what they want on a football club within reason, but as long as the money's there and it's secure, I've always believed that you should be able to spend money. It seems to have tightened and become far more of a focus in the last sort of 12 months, this FFP thing. How did Newcastle get out of that, and do you feel a little bit frustrated by it as well?
I think it's a good question on the expectations. So whenever you hear Newcastle mentioned externally, media, it's always richest club in the world tag.
Yeah.
Goes next to it, and I think that's been difficult for us, because there's almost that pressure on us, even though we're not living that reality. And we've had to battle that really. I think the players have handled that really, really well. Look, I've come from a club like Bournemouth that had to invest to grow. So I am a same train of thought as you. I think if the owner's got the money and wants to invest in a safe way and put the money into the club, then why can't he spend that money? I think that's how football should work. We don't want to see football clubs get into any kind of financial problems long term, but as long as that money's ring-fenced, I think they should be able to use it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that there has been an education piece, I think, in the last 6 to 12 months that I think people do recognise now, even though Newcastle have got the sort of wealthy owners, that they are restricted and they can't go and do what obviously some other clubs have done in the past 15 years. In terms of sort of looking at the leadership style of you, what are your non-negotiables? Let's say you come into Newcastle day one, obviously you've managed other clubs before, but look at Newcastle, what are your non-negotiables when you come here?
Well, I think first, look, regarding the players, I think you've got to get the players with you and fighting for you, and I think that's one of my non-negotiables, in the sense that I ask the players to give me everything. And that's not just on match day, that's every day at training. My mentality to training is, I take it very seriously. That's my match day really, and you've either got to train well and get on board, or you're not really going to exist under me. It's not going to work. I'm looking for players that want to work hard, improve, grow, and then I'll be by their side as long as they need me out on the training pitch. And I think once you have that buy-in from the players and they start to hopefully get success from it, then we grow from there really.
Have there been any examples that, obviously you trust the players, they trust you, But have there been occasions where you felt that in the last 2 years that maybe at the beginning that you thought, I've just got to maybe just clean up one or two things before I move forward? Has that happened here?
In what respects?
Just maybe with players. I mean, I actually look at the... It's because Alan Saint-Maximin was a brilliant player for Newcastle, wasn't he? A brilliant player for you. But then he left and Anthony Gordon come in, who probably at the time had less... His stats weren't as good as Saint-Maximin's. But it was almost like you were sort of saying, no, I want a certain type of player out there on that wing. Is that a fair comment, would you say?
Not necessarily in that individual circumstance. So Maxi was a player that I absolutely loved. And yes, he was slightly different to the sort of conventional wingers that maybe I've had in the past. An absolute maverick, a magician with the ball. But no, we were accommodating him and his strengths and his weaknesses within the team. Loved working with him. That was, again, financial fair play was hitting us, so we had to lose Maxi at that moment. And I think, it was probably his time to leave for him as well. And then, of course, you're looking to replace a player that was a difference maker. You could never go like for like. I don't know another Alan Saint-Maximin with his qualities, so you have to find someone different. And Anthony, that's probably where we are. We're recruiting players at the moment that are up and coming, that haven't hit their best levels. Try and get them early, develop them, and they grow into those players.
Is that not the best way to be, irrespective of the money? When I look at sort of the clubs who've gone for what would be, and the club I support have done it where they've gone for what would be sort of like the star signings, almost like the sort of players that have already reached the top. I went at Manchester United, I was there for 20 years. We never signed a player, maybe Robin van Persie towards the end, I think that was maybe one. It was always they had more left in the tank. Do you think that should ever change at Newcastle, that idea that you sign players that are just below the top level and they've got that growth?
Well, I think for my way of working, I think those players fit my style really well. So you're developing them and growing them in a certain way and moulding them to your style so they can fit into the team model the best way possible. I think if you have a finished product, there's not much moulding to do there. So I think possibly yes with what you say. I don't think that means there's not a place for a superstar or however you want to bracket that type of player, a difference maker. I think you can accommodate them as well. But I think for definitely where we are at the moment, with the constraints we're working under, that's the best way for us to work.
When I look at your sort of career over the last 10, 15 years, you've never failed to get the best out of every player or every team that you've had. How have you achieved that? Because I think that, to me, that is ultimate success as a leader, that you've been able to extract the maximum out of those people that you've worked with.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's totally true, although that's been my intention. Yeah. So I will every day come to work with a view to getting the best out of every individual player, progressing their careers in the best way possible, coaching them in the way that I would want to have been developed and helped, while still trying to sort of harness and help the team. It's quite a process-driven approach. It takes a lot of time and effort from me and the coaching staff to help the players in that way. But I do believe it can produce spectacular results when you get it right. And I think you can change people's careers, definitely.
What's your day? What time are you in here in the morning looking at these 200,000 markers that are on the board?
I certainly don't start the day by looking at them. So I'm in quite early. I do a gym session to help me mentally.
What time do you come in?
6:30 at the moment.
Every day here?
Every day here, half an hour. So I start sort of this period at 7. And then it's depending on the day, of course. If it's sort of far away from the game, it will be all about how we can help the team for the weekend, looking at our opponent, trying to find strengths, weaknesses, and go to work. Yeah.
How does that impact you coming in at 6:30 every day? Because I always think managers are different. You're obsessive about. I love football, but managers are obsessive about football. There's a difference. I couldn't do it. That idea of 6 every day, and then what time would you finish? Sort of standard time finishing it. Sort of.
Yeah, it depends on the day. So today will be sort of 5, 6 o'clock, I think. Yeah. But that can change.
Do you take it home with you?
Well, yes, without a doubt. So yesterday, sort of, it sticks in my head because it was yesterday. I get in, I sit on the sofa, the Champions League's on. I say to my eldest son, get me a pen and paper. I've got an idea. And you sort of like, been through the door 5 minutes, and I'm starting to write down an idea for tomorrow's training session by looking at the game for 5 minutes, and I'm thinking, God, I haven't seen my kids, I haven't, but it's that kind of, you're always there just looking at, or thinking of your team, thinking of the next game. Whatever the recent thought is, you can't escape it. That's how I live.
Do you get accused of being there but not being there, almost like you sort of...
Always. Of course, by my wife, by, my circle of friends now has got smaller and smaller and smaller. But because it does, because they're going off doing these things, and I'm here. I'm in this world at the moment, and I rarely come out of it. So.
What Champions League game were you watching? The Arsenal one or the City one?
No, I watched the City one.
The City one.
Yeah, that was a good game.
What do you like about it? I thought it was interesting. The first half, it was like a game of chess, wasn't it? Really, in terms of completely different styles, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I don't watch a game for enjoyment anymore. That's the thing. So as soon as I became a coach or a manager, they used to sit back, probably like we all do, or did when you're playing, and just enjoy the game and not think too much. Now it's, well, what are they doing there, and what are they doing there, and how are they approaching this, and it just becomes a tactical minefield. Yeah. So the enjoyment, sort of true love, has gone.
You can't even enjoy a game at night.
Not really. It's you're looking at it just tactically all the time, and why are they doing this? And it doesn't mean you don't enjoy it, but it's just, when you watch a game and the scoreline becomes important, but that's not the case for me now.
Forget City, because obviously I think that, one, they're in our league, and two, I think they're methodical every single week in what they do. What would you look at Madrid and think how they set up, how they played, sort of how would you look at that game differently than, say, I and the other people watching at home would?
Well, I don't think too differently for Real Madrid, because I think they, Carlos, just what he's done over a consistent number of years is unbelievable. But I think they're very much still talent-based. They've got unbelievable individuals that make a real difference, real pace on transitions. So I'm not necessarily looking at them too tactically, I don't think.
Right.
I think it's Manchester City who...
Are you looking at City, were you?
Yeah, but I think you're always looking at Manchester City. Not that I would ever look at them and go, because they're just so different from us, that I don't think you can take too much. But you can certainly take little things, and I respect what they do immensely.
It's the maddest league I've ever seen, that one.
I still look at that period as one of the happiest in my management career. We've got the best pyramid system for developing players and managers. And I'm a firm believer in that process, really. If you can't start with a high-profile job in the Premier League, then I think you have to.
You're the most successful English-British manager over the last 4 or 5 years in the Premier League. Are you aware of that in terms of sort of where that leads in terms of the conversation in the future? Obviously not now because you're at Newcastle, but have you got an ambition one day to sort of think about England or international football, maybe as you get older? Or
It's a strange one for me, because when I'm in this mode, I'm totally oblivious to everything. So I'm just so focused on the sort of the day-to-day part, and it's not a cliched answer, it's the truth, that I don't sort of open my head or lift my head and see what's going on or what people say. And talking a broader subject of the national team, so my big memories, and I'm not just saying because you're here, well I am, because you are here, but like watching you play for England in that era was very much me sort of my early years forming a love with England and really wanting them to do well in the major tournaments, and having that feeling of devastation when didn't quite get over the line.
Every 2 years.
Yeah, but it was... I love that feeling of watching the national team, and I was really submersed in it. I love England, and I love everything in it. I hope England go on and this summer win the Euros. I think they can. I love Gareth, and I've got real determination for that to happen. I've never really thought about international football for me personally. Who knows what will happen in the future.
When I look at it, I just think how difficult it has been for English coaches to establish themselves, not only in the Premier League, but in the top 6 of the Premier League, which is what you've done in the last couple of seasons. How does, just broadly, not necessarily relating to you, but how does broadly English coaching become more respected? What do we need to do as a country? You're obviously right at the forefront of it at the moment. disappointing for me because I think back to those 30, 40 years ago and I thought there were parts of sort of like the sort of Bobby Robson, Terry Venables era where it was quite respected in Europe with Barcelona and obviously PSV Eindhoven and other big jobs, but it seems to have sort of gone away a little bit. Well, it's gone away a lot actually.
Yeah, I think there is some really, really good coaches, English, British coaches in not just the Premier League but in the Championship and lower leagues. And I'm a firm believer in that process really. If you can't start with a high profile job in the Premier League, then I think you have to earn it. And I didn't really set out with that aim. It was just a case of trying to survive and trying to be as successful as I could, and ultimately ended up having success. But yeah, there's some really good coaches, and I think we've got the best pyramid system for developing players and managers. So I think the younger guys coming through have just got to keep being successful, and sometimes you're fighting against the grain because you're fighting against possibly bigger clubs, bigger budgets, but somehow you've got to try and find a way.
Is that one of your sort of great, if you think about, you worked at a club that was on the verge of bankruptcy, now you're working at a club that's sort of, if you like, extremely wealthy, but you've got such a broad, massive breadth of experience. I always think, how do you build a career as an English coach? Has it just happened, or did you always think it would happen that way? Is it a case of just opportunity-led and then you just sort of go for it type thing? Is it a bit like that? Or?
Opportunity. I never had a grand vision starting out. It was, as I said, it was survive. So first thing was, can we stay in the League Two? Fighting to drop into the conference. Then it was, can we survive and stabilise in League Two? We got promoted. Then it was exactly the same each year. It was, can we survive in League One? We got promoted, and it just built from there really. And now I'm sat here, which, it's been a lot, I have to say, a lot of sacrifice and hard work. I don't think you get anywhere without it in whatever job you're doing. But ultimately, looking back now, I've loved every second of it.
You know your next job's Salford, don't you? There's this club in League Two that I part-owned. We just need to get to the Premier League.
Well, I've been there before, League Two, so no surprise.
What did you make of League Two? I'm going to ask you a question. I think League Two, I watched it for 4 seasons. Every week, I don't miss a game. I think I've missed 1 game in 4 years, either by link or by going. It's the maddest league I've ever seen, that one. Did you feel like when you were in it, or did you... Obviously, you got out of it quite quickly, didn't you? But how did you get out of League Two quickly? What was it that sort of you felt got you out of it?
Well, no secrets and everything that you'll know. We had a goal scorer.
Right.
Brett Pittman was, as in terms of a finisher, one of the best I've ever worked with. And we had a solid backline. And I think if you have those 2 mixes, then you're going to be successful. I loved it. I loved the lower leagues. I played in League One near enough all my career. So I'm coming from that experience where I love the challenge, I love the competitiveness of the divisions, and it's one of those leagues I think that there's very little between the top teams and the bottom leagues, and if you can get the little details right, you can be successful quite quickly.
How did you travel with that team, or a portion of that team, to the Premier League? That just doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah, well, I didn't think it would happen either. It was one of those things where when we got promoted from League One, you sort of get to the Championship and you think we're going to have to rebuild here. This team probably is not going to be able to survive. I think we finished 10th in our first season in the Championship, and with real late momentum, really good late surge, and you're thinking, add a couple of players here. I think we signed Callum Wilson, who at the time wasn't the Callum Wilson that he is now. He was a young player coming through. And then suddenly the next year we were just an unbelievable team to manage. I loved every second of that. We won the Championship in great style. We played some unbelievable football. And some of those players that were there at the very early days had come all the way through. And then again, in the Premier League, you think, right, we're going to have to rebuild here. They're not going to survive in the Premier League. And those players went again. And suddenly you're thinking, we're giving the top teams a really good game with players that have fought with every fibre to be at that level. And it was, just so inspirational for me to manage that group of players. They were incredible.
Is it the classic case of a sort of tight-knit group who give their all, who've got a massive spirit, being able to just jump above potentially teams that have got more ability, cost more? It's that classic one of sort of hard work, isn't it, beating sort of talent, if you like?
It is absolutely that, and we could feel that at the time. You knew that, our players were giving more, and they had to give more to compete. But in saying that, there was also a lot of talent there as well. You can't get there without the ability, and you had players that were supremely talented too. And I still look at that period as one of the happiest in my management career.
Would you say it was the happiest season, that one, Championship one, going to the Premier League?
Well, I think when you win something,
Yeah.
when there's an actual trophy to lift, there's no better feeling. But then when you go into the Premier League's just an eye-opener on every level, and we were able to survive the early years in the Premier League, and I think that gave me just as much satisfaction as well.
What part of your job do you find... Is it this? What part of your job do you just think, what part of your job... I say this because I remember, again in Valencia, I found it because I was losing, which was obviously a biggest problem. But we played every single midweek, we're in the Europa League, and I was doing an interview Friday, Saturday, Tuesday, Wednesday after the game, and Friday, Saturday again. I thought, I've got nothing else to say. I mean, to be fair, it's not all helpful if you're losing matches. Is it the media demands that you think is probably the most difficult part, would you say, or would you say other parts?
I'd say that when you're not winning games and you're doing the media every 2-3 days, it is difficult. It's tough, yeah. Because you're going, I'm not sure what else, as you say, I'm not sure what else I can say here.
Yeah.
I find that difficult, but I wouldn't say that's the worst part. For me, the worst part is disappointing my players. I hate leaving good players out the team. I hate that moment when you're going to disappoint them, especially if they've got great attitudes and they're giving you everything they can give, and you're not picking them on a regular basis. I find that very difficult because I care about their respective journeys and I want them to enjoy playing for me. So I find that difficult.
How do you manage that?
Just honesty, I think, is always for me. If ever I'm in that situation, I just have to be really honest.
Yeah.
And I've found that's never harmed me.
Yeah.
Rather than shying away from a difficult conversation, I'll have it.
It's actually, to be fair, when people say to me what was unique about Sir Alex, he never left a player out of a game that they'd played in the game before without having a conversation with them one-on-one. Never. In all my time. Might not always tell you the truth why you're being left out. Sometimes he'd sort of say, I'm resting you, or sometimes he might say, well, this... But you would always have a conversation. Do you always have that conversation? If you were left out 3-4 games, he wouldn't. But if you were playing a game and then you didn't play the next, he would have that conversation. Do you tend to have that one-on-one conversation with the players?
Well, at least I've got one thing in common with Sir Alex. So that would be very much my philosophy. If you're in the team and you don't play the next game, I'll always have a conversation with you. But if you're not in for a run of games, then I wouldn't be having that conversation every week. But it's when there's a change to the lineup. And I believe the player deserves that respect.
Yeah, I always found it was mainly with England when players would say that sort of like, I think I can't remember who it was now, a team sheet went up on the wall almost. And you're looking at sort of, or it just announced and you'd see someone's face in the dressing room almost in shock. I could never understand how that would be the case. In terms of how that would sit with players, and obviously you feel the same way. Yeah.
From day one, that was sort of one of, you say, non-negotiables. That was one of my non-negotiables. That's my duty to do that for the player.
So you go home at night and you're watching the Champions League and you've got your notepad out. How does that, obviously from the point of view sort of your family and your wife, how do you escape from football? What is it that during the week that you do where you just have that half day, might be an evening, when you get, what is it that you do? Because no one ever knows what you do, which is a good thing, by the way. Obviously, you sort of keep your private life to yourself, but how do you get away from it?
I tend not to, really. Going back to your... Very rarely. I'd say, going back to your question where you said, what do you find most difficult, it would probably be that I find it difficult to take myself mentally away or do something for enjoyment. Now, I've got my kids, which I'm sort of excluding them. They're great company for me. They give me a different perspective. And I think without them, I'd find it very difficult. So that's excluding that really, the time that I have with them. But usually with 3 boys, where am I? I'm on a pitch. And I'm in the garden playing with them. So that, it's...
Are they all playing,
Yeah, they've got the football bug.
There's no escape.
There's no escape, but in some senses, I'm then back coaching again and in the garden and giving them a hard time.
How are you with them compared to the players? It's similar.
Yeah, it is similar, and I hope I'm all right. I hope I'm not damaging them. I will lend them my critique. I will try and help them and coach them. I get the odd, why can't I shoot? I can't do this or I can't do that. You're supposed to be helping me, and I'll get the blame. But no, they're amazing, and yeah, they love the game.
Moving on to Newcastle and now, and thinking about this job here, you're achieving what should be achieved here. How would you make that next step that is expected, but in reality is difficult with the current restrictions?
Yeah, I think the only way that I know is to smart recruitment. That is going to be ultimately, I think, where we'll succeed or fail. And when I say smart, we've got to get players for cheaper than maybe the market value, and we've got to get them before maybe they're recognised and develop them. I don't know another way with the restrictions as they are. And obviously keeping our current group that we've got, the really talented players that are making a difference and continue to grow. I think it can be done, but I think it's going to be very hard.
How has your recruitment involvement evolved during your managerial career? So go back to the beginning and then take us right the way through to now, where you've probably got an army of, obviously, there'll be an army of scouts, I suspect, at Newcastle and obviously different people at higher levels. How has it evolved? What do you do now and what did you do then?
Yeah, I'd say my actual role in everything isn't totally different, really. I mean, we had at Bournemouth in the very early days, we had one scout who was unpaid. So he was working for free, me and Jason, and that was it. So it would be the unpaid scout going, what about him? We would either play against them or see them go. In those days, you'd go and travel from Bournemouth 4 or 5 hours, watch them and come back, and that was it. And now, of course, yes, we have a huge recruitment team, sporting directors, you name it, we've got it. But I still have to watch the players in detail before signing them because, I've got to coach them. I've got to invest in them. I've got to take all the time to develop their games. I've got to know their games, and I've got to think that they fit the style. So my actual role in it hasn't changed. Of course, a lot of the work behind it beforehand is detailed now.
Is it mainly video watching now because of the fact that you're just so busy during the week? You're just watching hours and hours of video of that play. How do you get the character and personality bit right, which for you I think is essential? For every manager it's essential. Yeah,
so it is video. The personality stuff is more references, word of mouth. Luckily now through my journey I've met a lot of people, and usually there'll be a link to a club and there'll be a detailed conversation about what they're like.
You've done here at Newcastle, I think that since the new owner, I was expecting something different. I was expecting, for some reason, there to be money splashed. I was expecting there to be sort of certain types of players signed. But it's been a really, I would say, sensible sort of foundation that's been built over the last 2 years. Are you in phase one of that foundation? What's the plan? What's the sort of fight? I know you won't maybe have a 5 to 10 year plan, but what is the plan that's explained to you in terms of sort of what the expectation is to go above that level where you're currently at, and how do you do that as a club? Obviously, generate more revenue probably is the one thing.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the plan, I think it's very difficult. Whenever I've been previously hit with, right, we've got a 5-year plan. Yeah. I think for a manager, you always look at it and go, that's great, but let me focus on this year. That doesn't mean that I've always had the firm belief that every decision we make, whether it's recruitment or whatever it is for the football club, it's always taken with a long-term view, but also the short-term view. It's both mixed in. I'll never make a short-term decision that impacts the long-term negatively, but I don't work on 5-year plans. I can't. No. So I don't know. That's probably not my domain. My thought now is, can we end the season as well as we can, and then when we go into next season, let's improve again.
Well, it's probably a difficult question, but the one, obviously, Dan Ashford at this moment in time isn't here. What is your sort of upward reporting structure? Would you have gone to Dan in the past, or would you have gone to the chairman, or how would it work at Newcastle?
Yeah, when Dan was here, it was very much Dan. Yeah, Dan would be my reference point on anything, really. Now Dan's left, it's Darren Eales, the CEO. Yeah. So really, in terms of my working week and day to day, nothing's changed.
And managing up, has that been something you've always been comfortable with in terms of sort of football? Because some managers manage up well, some managers don't manage up well. You've obviously managed up well. How do you do that in terms of sort of how much contact do you ordinarily have?
I think it depends on the person, the owner, or whatever you're...
Do you send them the team on match day and things like that sort of stuff? Because some managers send sort of like... I've had it at Salford where I've never asked once for the team. I've never been involved in team selections. But sometimes you get the team sent to you on match day just because that's what the manager's obviously done at previous clubs. Do you do that type of thing? Or?
Absolutely not. I'll always try and do that
Yeah.
with the team. I won't tell anyone. I think it's very much individual based. So the owner that I had at Bournemouth he'd want sometimes a chat about the team, not the team you're going to pick, but the team, the squad. How was everybody looking?
Yeah.
And it was very informal and very relaxed. And I've always found that I've tried to concentrate on the job and do the job to the best of my ability to help me manage upwards, if that makes sense. That can alleviate a lot of the problems. And again, I think when you do communicate, you communicate honestly.
Yeah.
That's always been my big thing. So if I've made a mistake, I'll try and come out and say I've made a mistake, rather than try and hide it.
Yeah. We used to do a section on this interview that was called "Failure is a Bruise, Not a Tattoo," which was basically that sort of, obviously, I got it sent to me after I left Valencia. What would be that moment in your life where you think, that's the lowest I've been? What would be that moment where you think, that's it, I can't get any lower than that?
I think definitely the moment in my management career would be relegation from the Premier League. That was, I'd given so much into the Bournemouth job, and I cared so much about the team's success, the club's success, that I was so involved with that emotionally, living in the area, coming through the youth team there. I was Bournemouth through and through. So I really felt that pain, and I felt like I'd let everybody down. And I knew that it was time for me to leave. I had no more energy to give to help the club get back up. I was spent on energy. I needed to recharge myself. But that stayed with me for months and months and months.
Did it?
Yeah. But ultimately, it's probably helped me come out of that period refreshed, refocused, and helped me learn. I always think, like you say, the bruise. It's when you failed or perceived to have failed, you reset, or I did, and reevaluate, and then hopefully come back better.
How did you reevaluate? How did you sort of, if you like, reset in that 3-month period? What did you think, right, I'm going to do this differently next time?
I don't necessarily think I came out of it when I'm going to do this differently, but I reevaluated everything. So I went back, and I've said this in previous interviews, through all my training that I'd done, literally everything.
Well, that season or all previous seasons?
Like forever. Everything that I had footage of, I went back and tried to make it digital, because everything was in diaries.
Right.
I was going back through book after book after book, but I needed to sort of upgrade that. That didn't work anymore. So I wanted to make it digital, so I had everything a lot easier to find. And I think that I found that really, it might not sound it, but really therapeutic to go through all the old training, and that was really good. We did that 5 years ago. It was amazing. And I'd forgotten about it. And so I took a lot out of that. And that would just be one example of sort of going back, analysing, and then I felt coming back into my next job, I'd be a lot better for it.
Where are you at now as a manager in terms of sort of your thought process compared to where you were then at Bournemouth? In terms of sort of like confidence, belief, feeling assured, are you at a different level than you were at Bournemouth, or do you feel in a similar place?
I don't necessarily think I've changed in terms of my confidence and belief. I always felt I had definitely not an arrogance, I've never had that, but a strong work ethic, I think, gives you confidence. And I always feel like when we go into a game, I'm happy. I'm happy because I've done the work. And if we lose, we lose, but I can't give any more. So I always had that attitude. But I feel maybe because it's another club, I've had success at that second club, which was always a thing that was labelled against me. I didn't really care about that, but I think the perception was, you can only do it at Bournemouth. I certainly maybe feel better for getting that off my back.
Yeah, because the perception was obviously that when you came to Burnley in the north, that just wasn't for Eddie. That seemed to be the sort of, you'll have heard that perception, won't you? And obviously you've put that right now because you've come as north as it possibly gets. What was it at Burnley that just sort of didn't work for? What was it that sort of didn't happen for you?
I think Burnley was a difficult time, and again, it's been well documented that my mum died really suddenly, just in and around the end of my time at Burnley. And I have to be honest, from that moment and when that happened, I wasn't quite the same manager. That knocked me emotionally, and that's why I felt the need to go back to Bournemouth. That was it, really. I hoped to be a success at Burnley. I can't guarantee that I would have been, but I was working towards that. But from that moment, then and I think it was difficult for me.
Was it the one thing that knocked you off track? Obviously, your mother passing.
Yeah, it was, because it was so sudden, and yeah, I think when you're a football manager, you're supposed to be robust enough for anything. Like, this is the public perception that a manager can withstand anything, and you sort of get used to that. It doesn't matter what's happening in your life, you've got to put the same face on. You've got to be right. You've got to motivate your players. But I felt at that moment that I wasn't able to be the same person like the day after, just to come back into work. I just couldn't do it.
What piece of advice that your mum gave you would you still sort of draw upon now?
I don't think she wasn't really one for one-liners, you know, or the phrase. But the thing I took from her was her work ethic. You know, raising 5 kids on her own with very limited resources was
Did you have a few jobs, like multiple jobs?
Yeah, and it was that kind of. So I remember getting up with her in the morning, and she'd go to work in a newsagent. So that's an early start. That's like 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
So she's dragging me. Right, come on, we're going. And I used to love it. You know, sitting there with sweets and newspapers and all that kind of. But I'd do jobs with her and help her set up. Then she'd come back, get the kids ready for school. Then she'd go on to another job, a leather shop, selling leather goods, and it was just constant and cleaning, and it was constantly going from job to job to job. And these are, you know, the odd day when you don't go to school. You sort of see it, then pick the kids up, then cook them, and it's like non-stop. But that, I think, for me, looking at that as a young lad, it's just you can't help but be motivated in some way by seeing what your mum's going through.
When you think about the sort of what you've just spoke about with your mum there, and you look at those Newcastle fans, and I was coming up here for the last 10 years, obviously I've been coming up here for 25 years playing football, but they were down for a period. Obviously it was a difficult time for them. When you see that sort of happen, because there's a spirit up here, there's a work ethic up here in the north east that's incredible in Newcastle, and you think of those fans now when you see the flags and you see the atmosphere, do you feel that sort of connection to the fans in the sense of that they're giving up it's their everything here, isn't it?
Without a doubt, I felt that connection from day one. Now, I think when we first came to the club, you could sort of see the dedication of everybody, the camping out at the training ground to see us on our first day. You're turning up and you're going, people are waiting for us. It's like we were getting in at 6:30 and there was loads of it, and it's like, wow, people here are crazy for the football club. But we needed to try and generate that support in a positive way. We needed to try and galvanise that, and the biggest compliment I can say to everybody connected with Newcastle since we've been here is every game, home or away, they've just given us so much. And that feeling that we're stronger together is just so clear here. The crowd is such a powerful force. The people give so much for the football club. They're, for me, so dedicated. And it's a great area to live. I've loved it. But it's football. Everything's about Newcastle, and I just think it's been a great place to be.
Eddie, do you want to talk about anything else?
No. That's great.
Brilliant. Thank you.